It might make sense just to get some in case it catches on. If enough people think the same way, that becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Satoshi Nakamoto. Welcome to What is Your Bitcoin Story podcast, the podcast where we dive deep into the journeys and experiences of Bitcoiners from all walks of life. I'm your host, Gigi, and today we have an exciting guest with us, Blake Kaufman. Blake's Bitcoin journey began in 2020 when he was just 16 years old, after stumbling upon a YouTube video that piqued his interest in this revolutionary technology. By 2020, Blake was attending his first Bitcoin meetup at Lake Satoshi annual summer event. And just a few months later, at another Bitcoin meetup, he won an S9 Bitmain Bitcoin miner. Blake ingeniously ran his miner in his college dorm room and using the earned sats to fund his trip to El Salvador. Blake's passion didn't stop there. 6 months after his El Salvador trip, he proposed an innovative idea to his college using Bitcoin miners to heat classrooms or greenhouses. Unfortunately, the college shut down the idea, but undeterred, Blake channeled his passion for coding and Bitcoin into building a Bitcoin wallet, the Blitz Wallet, a project he's been dedicated to for building for the last 6 months. Blake lives by the philosophy of leaving the world a better place than when he came into it, a principle that drives his endeavors in the Bitcoin space. Join us as we explore Blake's fascinating Bitcoin story and hear how this young enthusiast is making waves in the Bitcoin community. Blake, welcome to the show.
Well, I appreciate that introduction. Yeah, it's funny hearing back the things that you've been able to do. And it's almost like a surreal moment because, sometimes you just get so caught up in what you're doing that you lose track of everything that you've done. And even like writing out those points and just the things that I've been able to do in the last 4 years that I've been in Bitcoin and the people that I've been able to meet. It's like, wow. I mean, it's a crazy world. And I'm just so glad that I'm living in a time that, I can go out on the internet, meet some strangers and have a blast. And I know it's probably not going to always be like this. So I'm making sure to soak up everything that I can, in this weird time that we're in.
Good, man. I was going to say, like, we as humans, we tend to kind of take things for granted and we should cherish this because we never know what's going to happen tomorrow or what the future beholds and all this kind of surveillance and privacy getting kind of stripped away in front of our fingers, like every day. Like, it's important for people to take in and kind of take advantage of this magical time that we find ourselves in. But going back to what you said, so in just a mere 4 years, which is what, like the average time frame for a college degree, right? Like you've went like on a whole roller coaster ride and from exploring, going to the meetups, winning a minor, mining in the college dorm, like and then after everything that followed through, then to you actually going and doing your first Bitcoin startup in just like 4 years. Imagine where you will be in another 4 years, right? And it's just kind of like time like picks up so fast that we really kind of need to, us once again, make the most of every moment, because like the time just passes and then before you know it, it's all gone. So it's really important what you mentioned to take advantage of the time and appreciate every moment.
Exactly. And I always have to, give a little shout out to my AP economics teacher senior year. He was the one who really sparked my interest in economics. And so having that introduction to economics, I was like, wait a second. I mean, there's kind of something going wrong with the fact that our government just continues to print money with like there's no consequences to that. And when you start to think about that, you're like, well, why are they doing that? And is there a solution to that? That's when I, just happened to stumble on to a YouTube video talking about Bitcoin. And I was like, wait a second. I know I have this problem and Bitcoin kind of sounds like it's the solution. So, what is it? And then I started looking into it more and I'm like, okay, yeah, this has some legs. So
do you remember, do you remember what video it was or who it was on the video that you were watching?
I can't 100% remember. I could probably find it if I scroll through my YouTube history like 4 years ago. I can't 100% remember who it was. But I know it was talking about the fixed supply and it was talking about actually the energy like consumption of it, and how all civilizations basically evolve through energy consumption. So if you
Yeah.
have like a technology that incentivizes the use of wasted energy,
Hmm.
that you can help progress civilization. So that was like, wow, that's amazing. Okay, so how can I then, help this mission, and how can I further the goals of Bitcoin? And I took, the $30 that I had at a 16-year-old and bought some on a random trading platform. I think it was Robinhood. And back in the day, actually, you couldn't send any Bitcoin off of Robinhood. So, I had it fully custodially in Robinhood, but it didn't matter to me. I was just like, all right, I'm in the mission. I'm with everybody else. Um, and it's just like the naive 16-year-old just going out and just buying something because of the perspective that I have, is like, yes, I want to make the world a better place. And then I find something that I think has the opportunity to really do that. And then that aligned my whole life into like, okay, I do have the ability now to leave this world a better place. Because I always grew up, my parents always enforced on me, like, you have to always be trying to help everybody else. They are super philanthropic. They're always giving their time and their energy to make everybody else's world, and the world then we live in, better. And Bitcoin is like kind of my thing that I'm really attached to, that I now believe I do have that ability. And so in the beginning, I thought it was just podcasting or just informational, like educating people is what I thought. Yes, that's my way. But
Hmm.
as I got more technical, I realized, wait a second, there's kind of a gap in between the products that Bitcoiners are building and the customer base that are going to be using those products. Like a lot of times I feel like Bitcoiners design products for Bitcoiners, but not regular people.
Yeah,
And it's not Bitcoiners who need the products. They already have Bitcoin. Like they already know how to
that's
use
true.
Bitcoin. It's everybody else that doesn't have that technical base, that is yearning for a solution to all their problems, but they can't get into Bitcoin because it's just a little bit too technical.
Hmm.
And so that is where I really based Blitz off of, is like a good introductory wallet that you don't have to know anything about Bitcoin, but you get exposure to Bitcoin and you get into the Bitcoin ecosystem, so that maybe one day if you're like, hey, this is really cool, I kind of want to take a step up, you can then graduate into all the amazing Bitcoin products that are out there. But it's the leap that you have to take from nothing to Bitcoin is too great for a majority of people out there, and that
Hmm.
gap I think needs to be fixed, and that's hopefully what I'm doing with Blitz. But it
Amazing.
all is centered in the philosophy of, I am here as a person trying to let everybody else into a world that I know is better. I know a Bitcoin world is better, and it's just how can I get everybody else into the Bitcoin world? Um,
How it's like building the Noah's Ark. Like, how do you get everyone on the boat, right?
It,
It's
exactly. But it's like right now, it's like Noah's Ark, but you have to solve like 18,000 complex mathematical problems
puzzles
before you
before
get
you
onto
get
the
on.
Ark. Exactly. It's not feasible for everybody to like solve a bunch of puzzles before they get onto the Ark. They should just be able to walk up the ladder, right?
True.
And that's
So
what I'm hopefully trying to build.
So I fully agree with you that some kind of Bitcoin products they're very over sophisticated, especially when we look at like kind of the privacy factor and
Mm-hmm.
let alone not even going into air gapped wallets where it's like a whole big procedure to get it through. It is super safe. Like I personally like my vault like long term hodl stash is all air gapped Bitcoin, but the
Mm-hmm.
average
Yeah.
person telling him it's funny. Like sometimes I get some family members and, I have to do some transaction and they're like, what are you doing? Like, what is this like hacking you're doing? I'm like, oh, no, I'm
Exactly.
just signing a Bitcoin transaction. They're like, what? Like you and your Bitcoin? Like they think I'm a psycho. So yeah, it's definitely not for the average person. And if we want to get this kind of next wave of people and really the future generations getting through and using it, we need to make it like stupid easy for people to
Mm-hmm.
just go ahead, download the app, get it through. Like before Blitz Wallet, like something I was definitely recommending to people was the wallet of Satoshi, because that to
Yep.
me was
Yep.
kind of like it was super easy. Like you just
Mm-hmm.
download the app. Of course, it is custodial.
Custodial.
But then again, like you need to take things into steps. You can't just tell people like you go full, self custody everything. And a lot of people, especially in the beginning, are very unreliable. Not unreliable. What's the name?
Unaccountable.
Unaccountable. Yeah, basically what I'm trying to say is kind of like they don't take it serious, and they just play around. So you don't want to be sending no significant funds and then kind of losing them forever. So kind of to me, Wallet to Satoshi was always like a nice, like when someone would say like, oh, nobody uses Bitcoin for transactions, I would be like, hey, open up your Apple Store or iOS, download Wallet to Satoshi, and I'm gonna zap you like your first 1,000 sats in like less than 2 minutes. And they'll be like, what? And like you download it and they'll be like, oh my God, it's amazing. And that was a nice introduction to getting them on. So I guess with Blitz Wallet, it's a custodial, right, solution, or you have a choice?
Non-custodial.
Oh, wow. But then when you create the app, you need to write your own seed phrase down, or you can do this later.
Yeah, so you have the ability to either go through like the verify steps where you say, hey, here's your seed words in order, or you can just hit, verify later. And then if they want to go into settings, they can then download their seed or write down their seed later. But one of the things that has recently been coming out with Lightning is the use of eCash or Liquid as basically holding places before you actually get into Lightning. So I know Mutiny, they use eCash where before you open up like 100,000 sat channel, you can just receive all the eCash. And then once you build up a big enough balance, you can then swap into Lightning. Aqua is kind of doing the similar thing, except you can't ever swap into Lightning. You basically just a liquid wallet.
Yeah.
And one of the things with Blitz is it's basically the Aqua experience until you have enough sats to where it then swaps you into Lightning. So it's trying to combine the ease of use of Wallet of Satoshi, where you load up your Blitz wallet, you can instantly send and receive sats with no channels, but it gradually then moves you into the Lightning ecosystem once you've built enough sats, so it's economical to open up your channel.
Interesting.
Yeah, so I really want to make it so like my grandma, who can barely use her phone, can just go on to Blitz and I can just send her sats and that's it. The same experience of Wallet of Satoshi, except all parts are non-custodial, so that she has access to all her funds and nobody else can get it.
So I guess from the other point, like from the regulatory standpoint, since we've seen like the US, Department of Justice is like, it's no pun intended, there's no justice, right? Like they're going after like self-sovereignty and self-custody. And it's crazy what's happening as we record this podcast, like this whole trial of the Samurai Wallet guys. Like it's scary and sad at the same moment, like where we should be praising these people that are kind of like helping us escape the Matrix. Like the Matrix is just kind of like, no, like come here, bad boys. Let us tell you you're not doing the right thing. And it's scary. And that was kind of like a domino effect to so many like self-custody wallets and wallet providers and like mixers that just like overnight either said they will be leaving US or stopping their service. Kind of where does Blitz Wallet fall in the midst of this kind of security, privacy chaos that's currently happening?
Yeah, that's a great question. And, I think it'll come out more once they actually release it and more people are on it. I don't think Blitz is in trouble because Blitz is just a software that it's a software, you get your keys and you can send and receive money. What I think spooked Phoenix to leave the US, which is I think the main Lightning wallet, non-custodial that left the US, is the fact that they run their own LSP. And then liquidity service provider, that might be considered a money transmitter in some world if you're regulating it, because they're routing payments. So since Blitz doesn't have an LSP or anything like that, Blitz doesn't specifically get hit with any of those money transmitter laws. So I don't think there are any regulations, at least at this moment, that would affect Blitz. But it's a great question, and hopefully it never comes to a time where it's like, hey, you're doing something illegal. That would suck.
It's crazy though, because right, that the saying, I'm sure you heard of, like never say never, right? And like when some people are like, oh, like this is never gonna happen in my country, and then it's like
Hmm.
2 years later, it's like bam, like authorities coming through. But like, I mean, if they carry on going down this route of like closing like self custody like providers, may that be wallet providers or any other service provider, um, what do you do then? Are you ready to leave to somewhere more kind of like Bitcoin friendlier, such as El Salvador, or you're just kind of, because in your ethos, as you said, kind of you want to leave the world a better place than
Yeah.
you came into it. But at the same time, I'm sure you love your motherland. Like you don't want to
Hmm.
just leave, but kind of if you have to weigh out these things, I know it's a hard choice. What would you like be leaning towards? You don't have to give a definitive answer. I don't think it's coming anytime soon. But the way things are going, I think really this fifth epoch that we've entered since April 2024, they're kind of
Hmm.
really in that stage of now they fight you, and like they're gonna go after like everyone that they could possibly go for to try and control the system, which essentially they'll never be able to control anymore. It's crumbling. Like
Yeah.
the internet was kind of the hole that started digging it, and now Bitcoin is just like a bulldozer that's digging this hole
Hmm.
like deeper and deeper and deeper, and they're never getting out of it. But it's that kind of control paranoia, tinfoil hat theory of no, we need to control this for the next 100 years, just like we did for the last 100 years. But how do you stand on that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a question that I'll answer if it ever comes down to it. But one of the things that comes to my mind initially is like building products that maybe, can be resistant to something like that.
Mm.
Like Blitz itself is a company, so really it can't be resistant because it's going to be incorporated in the jurisdiction that I'm in, which is the United States. So if laws change. But also creating incentives where they can't necessarily change the laws. And what I mean by that is if you have enough support for Bitcoin in America, then politicians have to play, at least in some realm, good with Bitcoiners and Bitcoin wallets and Bitcoin businesses because they are incentivized to want to be reelected. And if then
Mm.
you aren't on the position of pro Bitcoin, then you won't have the ability to then be reelected. And so I don't think it's necessarily about personally convincing politicians and governments to like Bitcoin. It's about making it so they can't not like Bitcoin.
Hmm.
And so with all the Lightning wallets and all the Bitcoin businesses, I think we should all aim to be making services that benefit the people, because once they benefit the people will use them. And then once the people use them, there'll be no ability to not have the government to not support them, because then the government would just crumble, right? Like
Yeah.
imagine if the government came out and then kicked out like Apple, Google, Amazon, all the FANGs companies out of the United States in a twist. You'd be like, well, like they employ a majority of Americans. What then? So if
Yeah.
you get to a point where the
And
Bitcoin
then does that
businesses,
blend in with trade with China? Like that would have such like the economy would collapse if they would do
it,
that.
it, exactly. So if you make it so the Bitcoin businesses are the ones that the people are supporting, the people are using, the people are working in, then there
Mm.
is no ability for the government to come in and say, we can't have this, because
I
it would
see.
collapse everything else.
I
So
see.
you just got to build products that people are wanting and going to use. It's as simple as that.
I like it. And we need to get the orange man back in the white office because the orange man supports the orange coin as we're hearing lately. It's
But it's a tricky road too, because again, I mean, as I said, politicians are incentivized to get into office and to please the people.
no,
Are politicians saying they're pro Bitcoin and crypto to just get into office and then they could 180 switch? It's
they
possible.
could.
So it's hard to trust them at their word. So when I see all these videos and people like, hey, he likes Bitcoin, like, hold up a second. Like, this is exactly how they stole all the gold, like 50 years ago. They were like, yeah, we were just going to take all the gold. They supported gold and then they took all the gold, right? So
Yeah.
you got to be careful about putting people in office who are like really pro something on a whim.
Mm.
Because are they pro because they understand it, or are they pro because they recognize that they could just get a large base to vote for them?
I think it's the latter. And I think people should be very wary and careful
Hmm.
about it. Because as you said, like supporting it and then taking it, like we can see now, especially this year with the launch of the ETFs and all that BlackRock juicy Bitcoin sitting in Coinbase's custody, which is like, what does it take for the government to be like, hey, that Bitcoin's our Bitcoin now, like not
Exactly.
much. So
I mean, I'm under the impression like again, nobody can technically take your Bitcoin.
hmm.
But if the government shows up to your door and says, "Hey, life in jail or your Bitcoin," there's a pretty, I mean, unless you don't value your life, there's a pretty easy choice right there, right? Like you're probably going to give up your Bitcoin.
Yeah, but here's the other question. How does the government know what's the maximum amount of Bitcoin you own? Because you can have a spoof hard wallet with like, let's say $100 in it and be
Hmm.
like, hey man, that's all the Bitcoin I've got. Like I had.
That's true, definitely true. Now of the people who own Bitcoin, most of them probably own the ETF at this point. So I guess they're not
That's
going to
easy
knock on their door. They're just going to
confiscation.
knock on the Coinbase's door. But even of all the people who own Bitcoin self-custodially, most probably just do like exchange to wallet
Hmm.
payments. And there really isn't too much privacy there because you KYC'd with the exchange and then you directly linked it to your hardware wallet. So it's not
Boom.
hard to
Absolute
track.
doxed. But there is
Exactly.
like I agree, but like there still is like some options of like to this day, like they're much less than before, but there still is like non KYC to a certain limit. Like if it's like
Hmm.
I don't know, like a transaction of like under 3 or 4,000 USD, like it's un
Yeah.
KYC'd. And I know MXC, which is like currently like one of the bigger exchanges. Uh, not I'm not saying that I'm using them, right? Like I don't have any
Yeah.
Bitcoin. I've lost in a boating accident
It's
that
a
last
voting
summer,
accident. I don't have
but
who has
it's
Bitcoin.
I mean like they never used to ask me about KYC, so like it was pretty fine. But the average person still, I totally agree with you, Blake. Like they happily submit their picture with their ID, and then as you said, that the only transactions in most cases they're doing, unless it's like a one-off conference ticket. Oh, let me get a 10% discount. Shout out to
Exactly.
BTC Prague happening. Actually, it's already happened after this recording is coming out. So nonetheless, BTC Prague 2025. Let's keep it in there. You can get some further discount with by buying your tickets in BTC. But yeah, I think you're definitely right. And kind of it's the irony of where Satoshi built this peer-to-peer cash, where it was incepted and created for people to be exchanging between each other. But then we're kind of in the stage where we're just like buying it of centralized exchanges and then getting
Hmm.
doxxed, and then different authorities and who not is kind of like, we're hoping they're not going to come looking for it, but they might as well. So it's kind
Well,
of a crazy situation.
I think that shows just kind of maybe how, I don't want to say uninformed, but how the perspective in Bitcoin is that everybody is going to take their privacy seriously and they won't, you know, they will give up some UI, UX to make sure that their privacy is the best. But I think that's a very uninformed perspective
Hmm.
because, as history shows, most people really do not care about their privacy and they just care about how well and how easy something works. Right? Like you look at, I think Microsoft just implemented the thing where it takes screenshots of your screen every 3 seconds to help its like AI chatbot. And people are going to love that because they're going to go on their computer and it's going to tell them exactly what they want at the exact same time, at the exact time they want it. And they're going to be like, holy crap, this is efficient. But little do they know, their screen is just being recorded every single second of every single day.
But that's what
And
Apple
so,
does anyways. It records
it,
like your voice all the time, and people are like,
it,
"Whoa, wow!" Like this is the
exactly.
ad I was exactly looking for. How does it know?
It, exactly. So it's like we have this idea in Bitcoin that we're going to be the most private, the most secure, the most everything, and everyone's going to do this thing. Everyone's going to be the most private, the most secure.
Mm,
But that's just not how it turns out to be.
true.
And so I think that shift needs to occur for a lot of Bitcoin businesses before we can really see people starting to jump into Bitcoin. Because if you're designing a solution for people who care about privacy and people who care about security, people who care about all these things, but they actually don't.
Mm.
Where they're not. Why are they going to use your stuff? You know?
Like I think that's a super valid point you brought up, like, and I like how you framed it from perspective that most people don't really care about their privacy. I think it's this digital era, right? Like this post 2000 age, right? Like when you were born, right? You were born like
Hmm.
past the 2000, right? I'm a little bit
Yeah.
older than you. I'm the early 90s kid, so like I still had a kind of I was like on the brink of like pre-digitalized world. Yet I
Yeah.
grew up with digital, but it was kind of like everything went so fast that like people in general always valued privacy like before the digital age. But then with digital, it was kind of like this privacy which every year it was you were giving away more and more of it for convenience. And now where we are in 2024, it's like in some aspect like such an Orwellian state where we've given like full access to all these big like tech companies where they can see all of our,
Hmm.
you know, from the nudes that we take to all the passwords to like everything, like nothing can be private
Yeah.
anymore, that it's kind of just like, we've given it up, you know. And then it's
Hmm.
like, and then we're trying in that same kind of state of mind tell them, oh, you know, be private about your Bitcoin. They're like, you know, sorry for my language, but if someone's got my dick pic, like who cares if they know my
Yeah.
private seed as well, you know? And it's
Exactly.
this kind of like, I think it's the overall humanity's path of slowly being stripped away of their privacy that they're like so hopeless now that it's kind of just like, who cares? Like if they can see
Hmm.
my Bitcoin UTXOs, let it be, you know? And
Yeah.
that's super dangerous because the whole point of Bitcoin is that everybody can be accountable for, and it's an open ledger, which to me, that's the most beautiful thing. To someone else, that's super scary, where it's like, oh, but like, I value my privacy, you know, like, I don't want
Hmm.
anybody knowing I buy some pot on a Friday night, you
Yeah.
know, like, and I go, don't worry, the US dollar cash will always be there for your, you know, your 2 Gs of pot. So don't worry about that. To me, it's more important how corrupt elect officials and like really big people are laundering like billions if not trillions of dollars, and nobody knows about that. And like
Yeah.
once we have a Bitcoin standard in place, that crap can never happen again. And that's more, like
Hmm.
much more powerful than someone seeing, you know, you buying a little bit of pot or whatever, or using your Bitcoin, which most cases you wouldn't even be doing it. You have dirty fiat for that, right?
Yeah.
Like it's called dirty for something, right? You gotta buy dirty things with it. So to me, the fact that Bitcoin is this open source ledger is super powerful. And yet I always tell people, you know, be careful with you know your UTXO
Hmm.
that you hold, because at the end of the day, people saying, you know, I'm holding Bitcoin. You're not really holding any Bitcoin. First of all the Bitcoin is in the ledger itself. Like it's on the nodes
Yeah.
on your computer. It's not in your pocket. It's not on your picture. And you simply have keys to the UTXOs that have been assigned to you and you have control over,
Yeah.
right? So, and then most people, they're like, UTXO, what? And like people, the DCA, like $10 a week. And they're like, oh, you know, I'll do DCA every week. And then it's like, do you ever consolidate those UTXOs? And they're like, consolidate UTXO, like,
Yeah.
Gigi, what are you talking about here? And I'm like, oh my
Hmm.
God, like, and you realize in the future there'll be unspendable
Understandable.
UTXOs. And then it's like this whole other wave of education, and then people need to understand that, you know, it's important. And this is where like education comes to play hugely. And I think it's super like the educational freedom force, as I like to call people who are educating, like there's so little of us. I include myself to a certain extent, and I'm looking to dabble more into it to help people kind of see the light of it. But like, there should be so much more of it, because as we progress, and we're progressing so fast, people like they're not taking things serious. And we started off
Hmm.
as like from the privacy aspect, but then like being optimizing, not even getting to the UTXO management, but just like where do you hold it on cold storage, hot storage, or just an ETF, which to me, like it's crazy to be holding an ETF. It's like it's
Yeah.
an IOU, like you kind of own something, but in reality you own nothing. But the beauty of owning Bitcoin is you're owning nothing that's essentially that is priceless in a sort of sense,
Hmm.
meaning value, like nothing, meaning it's not physical, right? Which
Yeah.
to us humans, it's super hard also to get your mind around something that's non-physical, it's so important and so valuable, and it keeps going up, but you can't see it, right? Because we
Exactly.
we
Yeah.
process everything without sensors, we can't smell it, we can't see it. Like we see a nice, beautiful, UTXO on our screen, but like we
Hmm.
can't touch it. So like it will take time for people to understand, and you know the significance of it. And if we zoom out for a second, and I'll finish my rant in a second, Blake.
Keep
Like
going.
so much has happened in 15 years that it's fascinating. We have $1 trillion asset that was literally a
Yeah.
program the Satoshi released on its own. None of that pre-mine bonanza, no staking, no DeFi, MEFI, whatever alphabet is coming next acronym. Like it was like the most beautiful launch that will never be replicated. And like what we've managed to bring in 15 years is crazy. And then when people are saying, oh, like, but there's no use case to it,
Hmm.
it's like, give me a fucking break. Like, there's no
Yeah.
use case to it. Like, Bitcoin saving lives today and forever,
Yeah.
it's going to be saving lives. And if you don't
Hmm.
see it, then my friend, you got to read some more and kind of learn more about it. So, yeah, going to this kind of, I'll transition to my next question, which was kind of, you going to a meetup and winning this S9 miner. How did that happen through, and kind of what was the next stage with setting it up in your dorm? Like, what was that like? What did your peers
Yeah.
think of you doing that?
Yeah. So I don't know if you definitely would not hear this, but there's a Bitcoin meetup in Michigan called Mid Michigan Bitcoin. And there's yearly Bitcoin like conferences
Mm-hmm.
at a little lake they own called Lake Satoshi. Um,
Nice
and me and
name.
one of my yeah, it's a great name. Me and one of my friends who was into Bitcoin, we went to their yearly summer one, and we were just having the best time of our life because it was just us and a bunch of Bitcoiners in a room. And it was the first time we really met like actual Bitcoiners outside of the two of us. Um,
Physically.
Physically, yeah, and even online. Honestly, this was before I really was on Twitter or anything. So it was the first time I met like an actual Bitcoiners. It was a great experience. And then afterward, they just have monthly Bitcoin meetups, and so I just kept going back to their monthly Bitcoin meetups. And one of the times they were raffling off an S9 miner, and I was lucky enough to win it. I think it was a little bit fixed, but I also want to say that I just randomly won it. Um, but after winning it, I actually went on Christmas break for my school. And over Christmas break, I asked my dad, I was like, how can we make this a little bit quieter so that I can run this in my dorm room? And we came up with the idea of just buying a $5 Facebook cooler, drilling basically an intake and an outtake hole, putting some ductwork on both sides. And that's how it ended up working. I went up to school after Christmas break, plugged it in, ran it for 3 months. Back then, it was actually making a decent amount of sats. Now it really doesn't make too much because of the difficulty. But then I took those sats that I generated, and we were taking a trip to El Salvador. So I paid my entrance fee in El Salvador with the Bitcoin generated from the Bitcoin miner, and then also for a bunch of my dinners in El Salvador. So it was just the craziest like full circle thing where I mined and then I spent with the same coins that I mined off of. And then
Amazing.
even crazier than that, President Bukele actually retweeted the tweet that I posted about me paying my entrance fee with Bitcoin. And I was like on cloud nine for a week. I remember I was getting on a flight because we went from El Salvador to Costa Rica, and my friend calls me. He's like, Blake, check Twitter. I was like, what's going on? What's going on Twitter? What's happening? He's like, Bukele just retweeted your tweet. I'm like, what? What's going on? So I checked Twitter, and then I had to get onto the plane. So I was like shaking on the plane the entire way to Costa Rica because I was like, holy crap, the president just retweeted my tweet.
Crazy.
So that's my Bitcoin mining story a little bit. And then the next year, I was a resident assistant for my college. So basically, I'm the one like person on your floor who you go to if there's any problems. And so I ran it in my dorm room again. So I did it for 2 years just so I could accumulate as many sats as I can from my little S9.
And I guess the like the college never found out, right? Like that you were mining it, or
No,
they
oh
did?
gosh, no. I don't know what the repercussions would have been if they did. Probably not the best, but they never found out. But again, I for like 6 to 8 months, I really tried at my college to get them to run at least a pilot program where they used the
Mm,
waste heat from the miners to heat the classrooms in the winter. Because where I live in Michigan, it gets pretty cold over
cool.
the winters, and winters are decently long. So there's definitely a use case for it. And I got all the way to the vice president of infrastructure and planning, and they said I just couldn't do it. And that was such a bummer to me because the optics of the first college in America supporting an entrepreneurial student in a Bitcoin mining journey to heat classrooms is just the most beautiful thing ever. And they just
Netflix
unfortunately
series calling, like docu-series would have
no,
been
it
done.
honestly is, and even the outreach from just all the Bitcoin community, it would have been
True.
amazing, but they just couldn't see the vision that I was trying to show them, so it ended up not working.
Well, maybe if that wouldn't have gone through, maybe Blitz Wallet wouldn't be here today, right? So like, I'm a true believer that everything happens for a reason, good or bad.
Mhm.
So it wasn't a lost cause, and sometimes people are just too blind to see it. But I'm more interested actually to ask, what is your finance teacher who got you interested on the topic of finance think about Bitcoin? Did you manage to already see him or no? Or he's kind of still on the sidelines?
No, so I remember talking to my, economics professor about Bitcoin, and he was not convinced about it back in the day. Now, that was 4 years ago, so I'm sure I could probably ask him again and see where he stands. But I'm not sure. I know when I talked to him before, he was on the same thing as everybody else, saying, it's a Ponzi scheme, it's this, it's that, it's whatever. But I would have to ask him again to see if he's changed his mind or not.
Well, maybe in the future, as you progress and as the conferences get bigger, and I'm talking about Bitcoin only conferences, maybe once you'll be on the big stage, you can give him an invite to come check out and hear what's happening in Bitcoin. I'm sure he would see it in a different light.
Hopefully for sure. I remember, so in one of my college classes, one of my professors talked about Bitcoin, and it was like one of the negatives, like, oh, it's a Ponzi or whatever. And I stayed after class, and we probably had like an hour conversation. It was the stupidest thing I've ever had in my entire life, though, because his argument was that because the government hasn't validated Bitcoin, it doesn't have any worth. And I was just dumbfounded by that. I was like, "What do you mean? What position even is that?" I've never heard that one. That was really stupid. And from that point on, I was like, "Okay, I'll take your class. I'll do your work, but I'm not trusting any of this information because you can't have a perspective like that on Bitcoin and then also be qualified to teach."
Yeah, no, I agree, Blake, and unfortunately, some people they take everything too serious if the government approves it or not, and the
Hmm.
government not always has the best intentions at mind. Unfortunately, it's even
Hmm.
though the governments were put in place to serve the people, but then kind of the corruption, and I'm talking about global governments, not any specific governments, kind of it's the table switched. It's now like we are working for them instead of them working for us. And
Yeah.
since it's that position, like I don't let alone trust everything. I hardly trust anything any government puts
Yeah.
out because they always have their own agenda, their own interest at hand. And it would be pretty suicidal for them to just be like globally endorsing Bitcoin, like, hey, yeah, let's expose all the Ponzi's that we're actually running. Let's just call that a Ponzi scheme, and it's like that. Back
Yeah.
back in high school, that kid that says calling everyone a bully, he's the biggest bully.
Hmm.
Is that kind of retrospect in the grown-ups world? But that
I
strategy
think it's
can only last for
also
so long, right? Until
yeah, and
like
I think it's
it gets
also
exposed.
a little bit about like having an open mind.
Mm.
I think a lot of people struggle with the the realization that they might be wrong about something because what's pushed by the media is, Bitcoin's bad, it consumes a lot of energy, it's bad for the environment. And so then most people have no thoughts for themselves. So they're like, okay, yeah, Bitcoin's bad for the environment, XYZ. And so if they do hear something positive about Bitcoin, it's really hard for someone to then in their mind switch to then having a positive image of Bitcoin, because that switch means that they accepted to themselves that they were wrong about something. And it's really hard to accept to yourself that you were wrong about something. And that is also a problem that we need to get over in the Bitcoin space is, how do you convince someone to have a new perspective while also not telling them that they're wrong? Because if you tell them they're wrong, they're going to be you just locked them out.
Yeah.
So it's like, how do you wake someone up without actually making them know that they're woken up, in a sense? It's a really hard thing to do, but it's something that needs to be done, and I'm hoping that comes through really good Bitcoin businesses that people can use without even knowing that they're using Bitcoin, but they're so good that when they find out it is Bitcoin, it doesn't matter that it's Bitcoin. It's just so useful to them.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And it's super hard. Like when people are like, why can't, most people call it orange pilling. I like calling it orange seeding because it's not like you take one pill and then boom, everything changes. It's
I like that a
really
lot.
a seeding process, right? You plant the seed and you got to be watering, that seed for the flower to blossom. And I don't know, like I guess us as humans and kind of how our brains work, it's all through like, I don't know, some people don't like to believe it, but like kind of like the symbolism and kind of just like exposure to current things, and the more times you're exposed to something good or bad, you're going to be kind of leading more towards it. So like subliminally getting like adjusted, like basically adopting whatever information is coming to you, because at the end of the day, like we have our eye receptors, which we're cosmically blind, yet we still believe that everything that's around us is what we see, and that's how our brains are programmed. So the more positive Bitcoin stuff we see, the easier it is for like the average person to kind of get more interested and see it as a more positive than a negative, like, oh, it's it's burning our oceans, which is absolute BS. Like on the contrary, like Bitcoin mining, like the harder it gets to mine, the more miners are incentivized to be using renewable energy to power their grids. And with Bitcoin, it's actually the first time that renewable energy is feasible to start up and get an ROI on. Because if you're setting up like a whole solar grid or tidal grid or whatever it is, or hydro setup, without Bitcoin mining, it would take you like 10, 20, 30, or even like in some cases 50 years to get your money back for the investment. But with mining, you can slash that at least in half, if not like a quarter of it. So if anything, Bitcoin mining is promoting green energy, and the harder the mining difficulty goes, the higher the hash rate, the more future miners will be incentivized to be using green energy. And once again, they can always there can be excess energy that can be used for other stuff. Like there's so many amazing cases now happening in Africa, especially a continent that is so rich with minerals and with natural resources, and it's always been kind of deprived, like specifically for its own people, of using electricity, fresh waters, and everything. And now with mining companies setting up there, specifically in hydro projects, there is like so much energy that they don't even have enough mining equipment to utilize all of that. And then suddenly there's such excess of electricity being generated that villages that for hundreds, if not thousands of years have been living in the dark and just using wood and fire to be making their meals and kind of lighting their villages, are now in 2024 being lit up for the first time. And that's all thanks to Bitcoin once again. So like Bitcoin is bringing a lot more good than a lot more bad into the world. And it's only a matter of time for the sentiment to shift. And I guess it's easier to bash something when you don't understand it than try and study and put kind of proof of work, no pun intended, into really understanding what this is and then kind of prompting it. So I think it's only a transition. And then once again, we know who big media is controlled by, right? Like the same guys that control the banks, the same guys that control education and medicine, and those guys like their privacy and like their anonymity, and Bitcoin is not their friend. So
Yeah,
I
and
think
the
that's
thing
why
about the
it's
Bitcoin education is though, like we were even talking about, UTXOs and how you have to manage UTXOs, and there's a bunch of stuff there that it's hard. How do you get people to actually study that? First of all, it's one really dry. Like if you really want to learn about it, it's probably some of the driest material that you will ever read, and it's hard to get through if you're not super determined to learn about it.
yeah.
And so, is it really feasible to onboard people into a system that's extremely complex to learn? I think that's a question we all have to ask ourselves is how do we onboard people into a system that's super complex? Or I think the better question is how do we make the super complex system really easy? I
I've
think
got the
that's
answer:
what we
Blitz
really
Wallet.
need to.
Like projects like yours that you don't
Exactly.
have to know nothing about, you don't need to read the Bitcoin standard book to kind of be like, like now I need the Blitz
Mhm.
Wallet, like I found my light bulb moment. The same thing is, I think, is with internet nowadays. Like tell me, Blake, how does the internet work? Like nobody really knows, like how does HTTP code and everything, like
Mhm.
unless you're a computer scientist, like nobody knows, but it just works. And
Yeah.
that's what we need Bitcoin, and I sense that's where you're trying to get across, that kind of we need to make Bitcoin so simple, and kind of the UX so easy that people don't even know they're using Bitcoin, yet they're using Bitcoin. And I guess for
Mhm.
that, we just need more incredible young minds such as yourself build products that are super easy for, call it, no coiners, that the average person to start using,
Mhm.
which in the background can then optimize things. May that be, as you said, UTXOs, which I totally agree with you. It's definitely not the sexiest topic of like, today we'll be learning about UTXO management. And it's like, what? And the same thing goes with, like, for example, running nodes. Like, to me, if you're like a diehard Bitcoin maxi and you're not running a node,
Mhm.
uh, the fuck are you doing with your life, bro?
Well,
Like, man,
you're
there's
not a
like,
Bitcoin maxi at
yeah,
that
you're
point
not
if
a
you're not
Bitcoin
running a
maxi.
node.
You're just a book cover maxi. Like,
Yeah.
like it's, to be honest, it's so easy to run a Bitcoin
So
node.
unbelievably easy. Literally go on eBay, buy a $200 old Windows computer, go to bitcoin.org, I think that's what it's called.
Yeah,
Download
get
Bitcoin
the
Core,
core.
let it run, and there you go. You have a Bitcoin node and you can verify your transactions for yourself. Like it is so stupid simple.
Or you can
Um,
literally get a Raspberry Pi for the
or
same amount,
Raspberry.
$150. You get yourself literally a external hard drive, which you probably have in your drawer,
Mhm,
and you connect those, and there's plenty of super easy, talking about the easiness of UIs. Umbrel, you download Umbrel, it's a free software, and it'll take you probably a week to download the Bitcoin blockchain transactions, but then after that you don't have to do nothing. It's right there, and you have full
mhm,
anonymity, you have full control, you don't have to trust anyone. You can verify every transaction, and it's so easy. Or as Blake said, if you even have an old computer, or you just want to go to a secondhand thrift shop, get a $200 computer, download the Bitcoin Core, and that's it. Like, it's so easy. Yet most people, I don't know, they think it's super hard, and then they mix it up with the whole mining, and they're like, oh, like, but what's mining? What's Bitcoin?
mhm,
And it's crazy because it's so simple. And, like, to be honest, I think, Blake, like, people also overestimate like the complexity of Bitcoin. Like, Bitcoin really works because it utilizes some super powerful tech, which is super simple at the same time. And Steve
mhm,
Jobs had the famous quote, said, "Only a genius can make something simple work. Any idiot can make something complicated and kind of unworkable." And I think that's super true. Like, Satoshi really, like, he connected, like, the encryption from the
mhm,
SHA-256 and the different protocols, and Adam Back's proof of work. Like, he got these cryptographic components that have been kind of like, and like released and brought into life over a period of like 30-40 years. The people don't even understand. Like, it's not like Bitcoin just magically happened out of nowhere, and Satoshi, just this alien being came down and was like, here's this tech, right? Like there was a lot of like OG cypherpunks that were like rolling out different things. And then Satoshi, like Steve Jobs, I really like comparing Satoshi to Steve Jobs, because Steve Jobs, he wasn't a designer. He wasn't a programmer. He wasn't like a lot of those things. He was a visionary. He was what you call a dot connector. He was like, like a mouse and the screen. Like Apple didn't invent the mouse. Xerox, like the photocopy machine, invented the mouse. But when Steve Jobs was like at Xerox offices, he saw the mouse and he was like, holy shit, like we need this in our products. And same thing with Satoshi. He didn't invent necessarily any of these components, but he was like, like we need this one with this one, with this one, with this one. And we get this perfect, monetary system, which once again, as I said, like, I think this is like one of the most beautiful technological innovations that humanity has ever seen and will ever create, because there's no way of replicating, especially the scarcity aspect. Even though it's digital scarcity, but that's even more powerful because anything can get replicated digitally. Right click, copy paste has always been, especially with the whole NFT craze, when people are like, oh, this is my NFT. It's like, bro, I can copy your Bored Ape like a gazillion times, right click, copy paste, and that's it. And
the funny thing about that is nobody even cares if you have the original copy or
who are you
not,
going to show
unless you're
to? Like,
trying to
here's my transaction. Here's my transaction.
Exactly.
And then how are you going to verify it? How are you going to verify? Like, here's my ID. Here's my, like, it's stupid. And it was just another fad that, I'm not here in a position to down talk it. I also got infected by the NFT craze, but at least I'm here to admit it, that, it was something that came and is gone. And in no way, shape, or form am I comparing it to Bitcoin or what Bitcoin's here to do. And especially with what we're currently seeing in 2024 with the whole, well, first it was inscriptions last year, and now we're having these runes and all this like BS, which at the end of the day, it's all junk that future node runners will have to be downloading to operate their own node. And I feel sorry for those guys. But these guys trying to do a quick buck flip and like being NFTs, the next future, feature for Bitcoin. Hell no, man. Like there's so many more powerful things that, can be built on top of Bitcoin than be inscripting some, I don't know, pixelated rock and using like 5 megabytes of space on that block. But whatever, like that's the beauty of Bitcoin. Who are we to say no, right? You want to do it? Go ahead, do it.
Exactly. And the counter argument to all of that is like, well, if people were actually using Bitcoin, most likely they would be outbid. Unless they're really pushing like they did on that, what was it? It was the halving block, and they got it up to like 50 Bitcoin in fees or something ridiculous. In that moment, you're going to get outbid for your transactions. But at most times, you will probably outbid the runes and stuff like that. So the funny thing about the spam is, like, you can fix the spam, or you could just make people use Bitcoin, and that could also by proxy fix the spam, unless they're willing to spend even more on the spam. But then that just takes more capital on their part, so they'll probably run out of money quicker. So I think it all just comes down to just, if you utilize Bitcoin, then Bitcoin will most likely fix its problems, just because there are incentive structures there that people only have a certain amount of money. So are you really going to overbid every single economical transaction for your JPEG?
No.
Maybe. I don't know. But there's only one way to find out.
Unless you're sitting really close to the printer.
Yeah, unless it's like you're really sitting close to a printer and you can just infinitely just spam more Bitcoin. But even in that scenario, to spam Bitcoin transactions mean you had to have bought Bitcoin itself. So if you just have everybody using Bitcoin and the price of like an economic transaction raises, and you have to then outbid that with a filter or a spam transaction, then you have to buy more Bitcoin on the back end. Which means,
I mean, if you're sitting next to a fiat printer, right? Like,
no, that's what I'm saying though. But even the fiat printer has to buy Bitcoin to spam the network.
Yeah, but the fiat printer, like, it doesn't take anything to print money, right? That's kind of the irony, right? That they're printing money out of thin air. I agree with you.
But they're buying a fixed supply asset.
Correct. So they're always buying it higher.
Yeah. So they're going to have to continue to spend more and more money. to
Yeah,
just spin the network more and more. So it to me, it just comes down to just utilize Bitcoin,
true.
and the spam, unless they sit really close to the printer, in my opinion, has to stop eventually.
And then again, like I hope so too, but I don't think the brrr machine is gonna stop anytime sooner because they're full. Have you watched what's his name? What's that movie called? Oh my god. Um, is it Jungle Thunder? What is it called? Thunder?
Ooh, if it's that, I have not watched that.
No.
No.
When there's a scene going, you never go full retard, and like I feel like the feds just going like full retard because like they're like we're dropping the rates, we're printing more money, QE number, I don't know, it's like it's out of hand, like QE6, QE7, they're just like printing crazy money. And the crazy thing is, when people are saying, especially Samson Mal's Omega candle, whenever you're going to hit that 1 million Bitcoin, like if we carry on printing at this rate, like this 1 million Bitcoin is going to happen very soon because like all this money is going to be going out and they're going to be buying more of this, as you
Mhm.
said, super scarce asset. And we see what's happening in exchanges for the last four years. Like it's just plummeting. We're at the
Yeah.
moment we're like at the lowest rate of Bitcoin on exchanges, and this is going to carry on going because it's becoming more and more scarce. And at the same time, the daily mine supply recently, like a month ago, went from 900 Bitcoin a day to 450. And then we
Mhm.
see these ETFs, and this is just US ETFs. Now we're seeing the Hong Kong ETFs, the European ETFs, all wanting to buy thousands of Bitcoins. And there's only 450 being mined every day. And not even them, just like miners everywhere around the world mining and hoarding Bitcoin. Like the supply shock is like coming in so bad that people don't understand that today Bitcoin at the 67, or let's round it up for ease of math, $70,000 is still a bargain. Like,
Mhm.
this saying of like, oh, it's too expensive, I'll wait for the dip. It's like, man, the longer you wait, the more you're gonna spend to buy it. And like,
Yeah.
no matter what price you got into Bitcoin, you would always think it's expensive. Like I
Mhm.
remember in mid 17, the first Bitcoin I was getting was in the range between $1,000 to $2,000, and I was like, man, like this is so expensive. Like it was
Yeah.
like a few bucks ago, a few years, and I'm like,
Mhm.
yeah, no, like I'll put a little bit. I should have like aped in. I should have gone full retard at that price, but we all live and learn. And now when it's like 70,000, it's like I still see it as super good price, but people are on the
Mhm.
sidelines like, no man, like 70,000, like that's crazy. And
Yeah.
when it's going to be $1 million, doesn't matter if you got in at 50K or 60K or 70K or 80K, doesn't matter. Like
Yeah.
what matters is you have some skin in the game, and you have some, when the flood comes in, you have some
Mhm.
safety.
I also hope the supply shock happens, but if it's mostly just on ETFs, I also hope they don't just, sell paper Bitcoin, kind of like what FTX did, where
True.
they sold paper Bitcoin. They were buying a bunch of Bitcoin, but it was all just paper Bitcoin, and they weren't actually buying any Bitcoin. So
I think there's
I think
only
it'll be
one
interesting to
exchange
see.
that's verifying their holdings, which I don't know if it's. I'm not gonna name it, but I think there was only one ETF that was actually sharing their whatever address of all the
Mhm.
Bitcoin that they own, and everybody else, especially BlackRock, like, no, it's in Coinbase. Like, trust us, we know what we're
Yeah, I
doing.
don't know
But
why
like,
they didn't do what El Salvador did and just
if you
post
haven't
their
opened,
address that
no,
has all their Bitcoin in it. Like, I'm not sure why they don't. Well, obviously we know why they don't do it because they probably might not have all the Bitcoin that they say they have. But it's so cool that you can go on and you can literally check El Salvador's Bitcoin count in real time to
yeah,
see that they're
you
doing
can
what
see
they
the
said
daily
they're doing.
one Bitcoin purchases happening consistently,
E
no matter what the
exactly, so
price.
why doesn't all these exchange or all the ETFs, why don't they just post their addresses where they hold their Bitcoin balance?
Because transparency is not their friend, I guess. They like being private, right? The irony.
The irony is it is hilarious, but then, yeah, it's hilarious.
So
I don't understand that.
So Blake, I want to ask you kind of to round it up and sum up, because I like keeping these pods short, but I definitely like with all guests, you're always more than invited to come on and our Bitcoin stories. Well, yours it only started really 4 years ago, right? There's so many more things that are yet to happen. So we will for sure have you back on the pod and discuss different things, and especially as Blitz Wallet progresses, I would love to have you on and talk more about latest features. But kind of to sum it up, like with all my guests, I ask kind of the one question and one advice that you would give to other young people who are just starting to explore Bitcoin. What would that one piece of advice be?
Explore Bitcoin because you genuinely have an interest in it, not because you think it's going to make you wealthy. Like,
oh, nice.
If you are greedy, it'll bite you. But if you're coming to Bitcoin because you believe that it is good for the world and it is that beacon of hope that you think it is, perfect. But a lot of people view Bitcoin as something they put money in and they'll get rich from it. And if you have that viewpoint, you won't succeed and you won't be on the mission that all the other Bitcoiners are on.
Amazing.
So my advice would be, if you're coming into Bitcoin, genuinely be interested in Bitcoin and genuinely believe that Bitcoin is the idea that we are going to be moving our current world into. But don't just come to Bitcoin because you think it's going to make you rich.
Because you want a Lambo, there's plenty of meme and shitcoins that you can, gamble your money away there.
Exactly.
Amazing. Well, Blake, once again, thanks so much for taking the time and coming on. I guess the last question would be, where can we send our listeners to follow your journey and all the amazing stuff you're doing with Blitz Wallet?
Yeah, it's Blake Kaufman 17, I think, on Twitter.
You need to upgrade that to 21.
I should probably. Yeah, it's Blake Kaufman 17 on Twitter. I think I actually created this. 17 might be when I was 17 years old.
To commemorate your 4 years in Bitcoin, right? Like, it would make sense.
And then you can also follow Blitz Wallet 1 on Twitter as well. That's where I post my updates on for Blitz Wallet.
Nice. Awesome. And do you have any upcoming, are you going to be attending any events or anything later this year, or anything planned yet, or nothing yet?
I've only attended Lake Satoshi Bitcoin meetups in Michigan. I haven't been able to make it out to any other ones just because, I'm still in college and that takes up a decent amount of my time. But hopefully in the future, I'll be able to make it out to some of the other conferences just to widen my Bitcoin experience with other Bitcoiners.
Amazing. Well, Blake, it's been such a pleasure having you on and hearing your story and having a chat. I'd like to give you a big congrats with everything you've already achieved, and good luck with the future progress. Any way we can help you out or any shout outs that we can do, we'd be more than happy to assist. And yeah, good luck with everything. Good luck with college. Good luck with Blitz Wallet development. Good luck in your Bitcoin journey. And we look forward to having you back in the future.
Thank you. It was a pleasure to be on this.